basically taken captive by her father and her brother. He's being interrogated, and he was being told things like, and you need to be careful because you never know what accidents could happen. Hi, welcome back to my channel. This week I wanted to talk about something that is pretty personal and played a big role in our life in the past couple of years. It's the big reason that we left Jordan and moved to Texas. I know I've shared some reasons in the past about why we moved from Jordan, some of which being the fact that I was pregnant and wanted to give birth to my son here in the US, which is part of it, but there was a much larger, much more emotional and traumatic reason that we ended up moving back to the US when we did. And because originally when we were planning on getting married and planning for the future, we were hoping to stay in Jordan. That was our original goal, was that we were going to get married and we were going to make a life and live in Jordan. And all of that changed as several things fell apart. So I'm just gonna launch into the whole story. It's very involved and maybe a little bit confusing and may sound like something out of a movie or out of a book, but I promise you it's the truth. It's what really happened. If you have questions about what I say, please feel free to leave those in the comments. I know that it's going to be a crazy story to follow and some parts of it might be confusing, but I want you to know what happened to us and what's really going on in the world. I don't think it was just a one-time thing that happened to us. I think it is probably happening to other people. So I just want to create some awareness about things that are happening under the surface in Jordan. I love Jordan. It's a wonderful country in many ways, but this particular part of our time and experience in Jordan was very difficult and very traumatic and just really heartbreaking to me. Let me dive into it and I will explain the story as best I can. So just to lay some groundwork for this story, before I moved to Jordan to get married to my husband, the church that he had been a part of and had been employed by came under persecution from the government and was shut down because they had relationships with Muslims. They were talking with Muslims about Christianity. I mean, they weren't forcing it down anyone's throat, but if Muslims had questions about Christianity, they shared, they were honest. That's part of what being a Christian is that we believe that Jesus Christ is the truth, and if other people want to know about that and have questions about that, we're going to share no matter what. But the Jordanian government didn't like that, didn't respect that, and as a result, shut down my husband's church and threatened the pastor, just made them feel unsafe. They ended up leaving Jordan and coming to Texas, to San Antonio, where we now live also. So that all happened prior to my moving to Jordan. When I moved to Jordan, there were still some residual pieces of the church left. Like there was a guest house that the church had owned and used, like when they would have people coming from other countries to visit the church, to do work in Jordan. And it was in this guest house that I lived during my time in Jordan. The pastor and his wife are dear friends, and they so graciously allowed me to live in that guest house rent-free. If you go back to some of my old videos, I did an apartment tour of that guest house that I lived in, if you want to go back and see that. It was a beautiful house and I was very blessed and thankful to live there. But it was a guest house, so it had a ton of room and I was just one person living in like one of 5 or 6 bedrooms. While I was living there and before my husband and I got married, my husband's former pastor's wife reached out to me and said, there is a lady that I met here in the US who's Palestinian background who is now in Jordan. She was told that her father died and that she needed to come back to Palestine, to Jordan, in order to wrap up some things with his estate. He'd left her some inheritance. And so she had come into Jordan. The other important factor here is that while she was living in the US just on her own, she had converted from Islam to Christianity. That was just a decision that she made personally. Somehow her family back in Palestine, in Jordan, also had found out that she had converted to Islam, and so they told her that her father had died. But then she arrives back in the Middle East and discovers that her father is alive and well and angry angry that she has converted and has used this as a ploy to get her back so that she can be dealt with and disciplined according to the rules of Islam. The other important thing here is that this woman had brought her son, who was born in the US, so he's an American citizen. She was not, she was a visa holder. She had brought her young American son with her. So she arrives in Jordan, is basically taken captive by her father and her brother, and is kept in this apartment in Jordan, in Amman. And somehow she manages to reach out to my husband's pastor's wife, who she had a connection with, and said, I'm in Jordan, I'm in trouble, I need somewhere to go. I need to get away from my father and my brother. I don't feel safe. I feel like my life is in danger. And so, of course, my husband's pastor's wife, who her name is Lana. Hopefully she doesn't mind me sharing that, but it's a pretty common name in Jordan, I think. So her name is Lana, the pastor's wife. And so Lana reaches out to me and says, there's this lady that I met in the US who is in Jordan in trouble. She needs a place to stay. Can she stay with you? And just to help clarify things, I don't want to use people's real names all the time just for their own protection, but this lady, we'll call her Amy. So she says, this lady Amy needs help. She needs a place to stay. Can she come and stay at the guest house with you? And I'm like, of course, got so much room. I want to help. So yeah, she comes and lives with me. She and her son come and live with me in the guest house for probably 3 or 4 months altogether. During that time, she is trying to figure out how to get back to the US. So she is going to the American embassy, is coming back and telling me, oh, like they're gonna help me because my son's American. My visa's expired, but they wanna help him. And so because I'm his mother, they wanna help me. And so this is who I'm meeting with, and this is what they're doing to help me. I've got to get them this paperwork. I've got to do this, this, and this. And then they'll be able to get me a visa to go back to the US so that I can get away from my father and my family and just back to safety. Basically, we're treating her like family, like she's with us. She was there in my home on the day that I was getting ready for my wedding. I had all my wedding photos at the house, and like she's there and her son's there. We got really close. We had a lot of conversations and really built a relationship. A few weeks after my husband and I got married, my husband is also now living in the guest house with me. He and I go away for the day just to visit his family and spend some time with them. And we come back in the evening and Amy and her son are gone. Like, have just picked up, packed everything, and have gone without saying goodbye or anything. And at first we were like, whoa, like, is she okay? Is something wrong? Did like her father come? But we reached out to some other friends who were part of the church that closed, and they're like, oh no, she's with us. She needed a change of scene. She's stressed about her visa and everything that's happening with the embassy and how difficult that is. And so she wanted to be in a different place, clear her head for a while. So we're like, okay, still a little bit weird, but that's what she needs to do. If that's what she wants, okay, that's fine. We're not going to question it. But then we don't hear anything from that family who we were also close with, or from Amy, for weeks. And it just feels like there's this weird distance and tension, and we're like, what's going on? Like, this is just a little bit odd. Did like we offend her? Did we say something, do something that made her upset and we didn't know about it, that offended them, this other family? But mostly we just left it alone. At the same time that this is happening, we were trying to apply for my permanent residency in Jordan so that I could stay without having to renew a visa every few months, which is what I had been doing. So we were completing the application for that, and we submit it, and we get a notification saying you need to come in for an interview. But it's not a normal interview. They say you need to come into Jordanian intelligence, which is kind of the equivalent of like the American FBI or CIA or something. And they're like, they want to interview you. And we're like, what? Like, why? Like, this is just an immigration issue. Like, this is really weird. Like, my husband was really kind of freaked out that they wanted to interview us. And well, supposedly that they wanted to interview me. He comes with me to the interview. We go in, and they ask about 2 questions about me: where I'm from, where I went to school, something like that. And then the rest of the time, they're just talking to my husband, asking him questions about his former church, his former pastor, the work they did, all of this stuff that's completely unconnected to my permanent residency. And actually the guy interviewing him was like, "Oh, you didn't need to bring your wife. We just wanted to talk to you." Like, he was very open and honest that it really had nothing to do with my application at all. They really just wanted to get at him and like get information about this church that had closed and the pastor and his family who had left Jordan for safety reasons and come to the US. So this is super concerning to us because at the time that the church closed, I remember asking Lana, "Do you think that Jawad is in danger?" My husband, like, "Do you think that the government is going to cause problems for him?" And at that time, she was like, "No, we don't think he's on their radar." They interviewed the pastor, they interviewed some other staff and members of the church, but they never said anything about Jawad. They never asked to interview him or see him or do anything with him. So she was like, "I don't think that they even care or really recognize that he worked at the church." So that was what we had kind of been functioning under. That line of thinking is, oh, he's not in the crosshairs of the government at all. But now it is very clear that he is, and we don't know like what changed. It's not like my husband was like, you know, out preaching on the street corners, though he would probably love to do that. But no, like, there wasn't really any ministry opportunities. The church was shut down. Why is my husband now suddenly on the government's radar and on their bad side? So we're kind of freaked out by that, but we go home, and a week or 2 later, Lana contacts me by text message, and she says, "Have you talked to this other family and to Amy recently?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "You need to go and talk to them because something is going on that is not good. It doesn't make any sense. You need to go talk to them and figure this out with them." And I was like, okay, this is really weird. My husband and I go to sit down with them at their home, and this crazy story comes out. Apparently, while Amy had been living with me and communicating with the embassy, they had been telling her that Sarah, me, has been trying to use your son as a means to get her husband to the US faster. She's gonna try and take your son, basically kidnap him, and use him for her own ends to get her husband to the US. And you can't trust her, so you shouldn't tell her any important information. You should try and get away from her. She's gonna cause you problems. That's why she supposedly picked up and left the guest house with me and my husband and moved in with this other family. Then while she's living with that family, the embassy is telling them, sending them emails, calling them, saying, "Oh, because you've been helping Amy and her son, we're so thankful that you've done that for an American citizen. We want to help you and your family also go to the US. So we need information about your kids, about your birth certificates, your background. We need to know that like your ministry was actually legit, that you did with this church that closed. So like send us videos of the work you did and tell us all about it and who was involved." And so they're believing that this is the embassy, and so they give them all of this information, names, dates, lists of people, like tons of information. But they started to become suspicious just with the level of invasiveness of all the information that the embassy was supposedly asking for, just some things that didn't seem professional. So when they started to like feel suspicious about it, that's when they decided that they needed to talk to us and to bring us into it. At that point, they show me these emails that they have gotten from the embassy, which are clearly not from the embassy. They're from a Gmail address. They're written by a non-native English speaker, which they wouldn't have known. They're not native English speakers. And I mean, it was okay English, but not phrased or said the way a professional American would say things, again, from a Gmail address. Somebody has been impersonating the embassy, sending these emails, also making phone calls to them, giving them instructions, and feeding them all this crazy information about me and about my husband. We're now all super freaked out because we're like, who is this? Because I'm used to like the scams that you see in America where someone tries to steal your identity, they want your credit card card info, they want your bank account info, they want, your mother's birthday so they can sign into your personal accounts and steal money and steal your identity. But the stuff that these people were asking for, who were impersonating the embassy, was not that kind of information. They were asking for clothing sizes of the children, like just weird stuff that your average scammer doesn't care about. We decide we need to go and talk with the actual embassy, go in person, get in the door and talk to real embassy workers. We go to the embassy, and initially they talk with Amy and with the husband of this other family that Amy had been staying with, and I wasn't able to go in and listen to any of that, but they go in and they share their side of it, and then they come back out, and I am able to go in and I speak with the embassy worker, and she says, I just spoke with Amy and something isn't lining up here. This person that Amy says she has been contacting at the embassy, that she's met with here and that she's been working with for the past few months, there is nobody by that name who's ever worked here, and we have no record of her ever coming into the embassy at any point. So obviously that is super alarming, because everything is already got us in shock and just we're emotionally a wreck, overstressed, and now this woman who had lived with me for 3 or 4 months, who I had built a relationship with, had numerous conversations with, had in-depth conversations about what the embassy was doing to help her and where she was going and who she was talking to, that was all plausible, that all made sense when she said it, is now apparently been a lie. We leave the embassy, and the husband of this family that she had been staying with is livid. And so he is kind of pushing her to tell the truth. Like, what is going on? You've been staying with my family. Have you put me in danger? Like, what is going on? And so she finally breaks down and admits that when she entered Jordan at the airport, Jordanian intelligence had gone through her phone and had found pictures of her baptism in the US, and had also found contact information for Lana and Ryad, pastors of this church that had closed. They're like, we want to know information about them and who they're connected with and their family, so you're going to basically spy on them for us and feed us information. I think that they probably threatened her son and threatened her as well. According to what she said, she agreed to help them and had been feeding them information the whole time that she lived with me and the whole time that she lived with this other family. And so that is why my husband came onto the radar of Jordanian intelligence. And after everything with Amy came to light, Jordanian intelligence called my husband in again for interrogation, this time without me. I should probably note that Jordan legally has 2 official religions, Jordan is a religiously liberal country compared to other ones in the Middle East. It's majority Islamic, but Christians are also allowed to practice their faith there. They're not going to be persecuted just for being Christian. But because of Islamic law, it is legal for a Christian to convert to Islam, but not for a Muslim to convert to Christianity. That's not okay. And so that is what they were upset with my husband about. And because he had worked for a church that didn't respect that the way that the government wanted them to, because that's not in line with being a Christian. Like, if someone wants to know the truth, we're going to share it. He's being interrogated, and they basically tell him, like, you shouldn't have any more contact with your pastor, like, stop talking to him. He's in the US, but don't talk on the phone with him, don't have any connection, like, you should end that relationship. And they also sort of subtly threaten him. So because it's not illegal to be a Christian or to have a church in Jordan, they can't legally throw him in prison. They can't legally punish him for being a Christian. But because they don't like what he stands for and they don't like what his church has stood for in the past, they're going to subtly threaten them. And what that means is he was being told things like, you need to think about your mother and your wife and your siblings. They need you. And what if something happened to you? What would they do? And you need to be careful because you never know what accidents could happen. Like something could happen to you and that would just be too bad, wouldn't it? And so these are the kind of things that they were saying to him. And at this point, I decided we need to leave. I mean, my husband had arrived at that conclusion also. It wasn't just me directing things. We decided together, we need to leave Jordan. This is not safe. This is not productive. This is not going to be the life that we wanted to live in Jordan. We're just going to be looking over our shoulder all the time. We're not going to feel safe. We're not even going to really be able to serve the Lord the way that we want to if we just always have the government's crosshairs on us. I speak with the embassy and they agree this isn't good, this isn't safe. We can't address the Jordanian government directly because they're a sovereign nation, they have their own laws, but we will try to get you and your husband out as quickly as we can. My husband qualifies for a green card because he's married to me, but the typical green card process takes anywhere from a year to a year and a half. But because the embassy was trying to fast track things for us and push it through because they recognized the danger that we were in, we got my husband's visa in about 3 months from start to finish, which is unheard of. I've never ever heard of anyone getting it that fast. And they actually suggested that I leave Jordan ahead of my husband because I was pregnant and I'm the American citizen, and they're like, you can just leave and we'll try and work on things for your husband while you're gone. But I was like, I don't feel good about that, because they were also clear. I asked them, do you think anything is going to happen to my husband? Do you think that he's safe? And they kind of danced around the question a little bit, but they're like, we don't think anything will happen to him when you're around because you're an American citizen, and yeah, so we don't think anything would happen. So essentially, I was the bodyguard for my husband. I'm 5'3", skinny little white girl over here, and I am functionally the safety bodyguard for my 5'11", 200-pound plus husband. Knowing that, I was like, no, I'm gonna stay with him because I want to make sure that he is gonna be okay and that nothing will happen to him, because I didn't even want to think about that. So we ended up getting his visa within 3 months, just a few months before I was due to deliver. We got out of Jordan and get to the US, and I mean, we're really thankful to be here, and we moved to San Antonio, where his pastor and his family are now living and have started a new church here in San Antonio. They were a rock for us. They let us live with them for over a month, took care of us. We literally arrived in the US with basically the clothes on our back and, a few suitcases of clothes. Not totally destitute, but really with hardly anything but clothes. We had nothing, no car, no money, no jobs, no place to live, and we could not have survived if they didn't open their homes and just really take care of us. I cannot say enough about his pastor and his wife. They were there for us even when we were in Jordan. They were constantly calling and checking in on us and giving us advice. Before we went to the embassy, they connected with some high-level officials here in the US to give us advice and pointers on how to handle things at the embassy. They are the epitome of what godly family should be. Christian family is not always about blood. It's about being spiritually connected to our Father in heaven. We are God's adopted children, and the church should be a family. His pastor and his wife and their family have just been that for us. They're the reason we moved to San Antonio. They've just loved and cared for us so well. Yeah, we could not have done it without them. I'm not entirely sure how to wrap up this story. I've kind of rambled around and it's probably been a little bit confusing, but hopefully it's mostly made sense. I know it sounds like something out of a novel, but it really is what happened, and it was crazy and it was traumatic to go through. I'm just so thankful that God took care of us in that situation, and that something that was clearly meant to cause us harm, God was able to turn it around and use it for our good and his glory. I guess I just want to say that's the kind of God that's the God of Christianity. He's a God of love, of mercy, of miracles, that he just takes care of his children. Not that we don't go through hard things or have challenges or difficulty, but he takes care of us and he loves us. And that's the God that I want you to know. And if you're a Christian, I hope that this story encourages you and strengthens your faith and inspires you to seek out Christian community of your own. If you're not a Christian, and even if you think I'm crazy for being a Christian, I want to know your thoughts, your opinions, your questions in the comments, because I think before embracing any faith, you need to question it. You need to study it. You need to know what is truly involved in being part of a certain religion. Understand who the God is that you serve. Is it a God who is real, or is it a God that is made up by men, made up by people? I encourage you to study and learn for yourself, and not to just blindly accept what others have told you should believe. I think I'll just end it there. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still here and have stuck with it this long, if you enjoyed it, if you found it interesting, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.